Who wants to start? The most difficult motion. Come on. You all have to ask to figure out one motion that is very hard for you or that you don't understand. So now it's time to hit us. Rock.
This house knows when and where everyone will die. This house will not tell anyone.
Okay. What is that debate about? So did you all hear the motion?
Yes, sir.
You did. Okay. Do you understand the motion?
Yeah.
Okay. And what is that motion about?
It is about whether or not people should know when they are going to die.
Okay. Why is that important?
Because maybe,
I mean, you can forget about where they're going to die because that's not relevant for debate completely. And I think the original motion that was when. Only when. So why is that important?
If people know when they will die, they can do all things they want before.
Yes. Yes. Great. What else?
Life management.
Sorry?
Life management.
Life management.
And time management.
Okay. And how would that change the status quo?
Well, it will change the way how they behave. Basically, when they know how, when they're going to die, they'll probably have a totally different way of looking at life. They might even go and loot and just go and break some stores.
Okay.
So we have some moral perspective.
They cannot be more scary because they know the exact date when they are going to die, and that scares them.
Oh, but how about the things that they can try, right? So, for instance, about the fear, when we were talking about fear, right? Would you be afraid of dying since you know that you're not going to die that day?
No.
Would you do way more risky stuff than you're doing right now?
Yes, of course. But when the day is coming, so people can act to be more stressed and pay for nothing because of that fear. This feeling is
Yeah. Definitely. They wouldn't be concerned about their lives anymore, right? Anybody else? Any other idea? Okay, since we know that each and every debate motion is about a problem, what is the problem? Why has somebody given this debate?
government won't tell people when they are dying, right?
You're an individual, basically, that knows that information and you wouldn't share it with them.
And that's the problem, because only a few people know this information.
How about the reason?
It's not fair.
About the reason why are these people going to die? I mean, is there any way of manipulating their death? I mean, if you decide that the man A should die at the 31st of December, and this person decides to do something really great about himself or the world, I don't know, and you just decide that he has to die on this day. Isn't that a way of manipulating human's life, not the way it is expected to be? I mean,
any other idea?
I believe the problem is with the question whether for the individual is better to know about his future and or is it better for him to follow his normal way of life?
What is it?
If you know that a certain thing will happen, this will definitely change the line of your life that would have been like if you didn't. For example, if I know that after 3 months I'm going to die, I will do different things than if I don't. And basically I will change the whole line of my life, and for that I will change the life in the people, in the lives of the people around me. So it's kind of connected.
Why is that a problem?
Is it a problem because this is actually a change, and we are supposed to live our lives. And well, you know, it's if we say that there is a normal way of living our lives, if we say that this is one straight road that we have to go on, and the things just happen because they have to happen, and if we start changing things, this may have consequences that nobody can predict actually. Those consequences can be amazing, they can be awesome, but they can be also destructive.
And probably the main aim of a human's life would be to prevent their death in this day. I mean, they're not going to try to live as expected, they're going to try to prevent their death.
Yeah, first, second.
Okay, for me, it seems that when we know when we die, we will make our life valuable, but I will ask why should we know when we die to make our life valuable? Why we don't say, well, I'll die tomorrow, so I'll do the valuable things right now? Why should I wait to know when I will die in order to change myself?
This reminds me of something, and it reminds me of volunteering during the Second World War. We all watched the new movie, The Imitation Game, that came out, and it's pretty much the same thing. They deciphered Enigma, and they knew when the Germans were going to hit each of the warships or whatever, each target, and how many British soldiers or Allied soldiers were going to die. And yet, they kept that information hidden and secret. So I think that's where the problem is, because they believe in something far greater than the human value, than human life, to stop the war at all costs, even if it means that 100,000 people have to die.
Okay, but that's a completely different situation, right?
Well, yeah, that's how I mean,
I get why it reminds you of that, but like it's a completely different debate. Even if we're debating, for instance, whether or not they should have shared that information before or saved lives, it's different. It's quite different debate than this one, right? Just a second.
I believe that, for example, if the government tells us at some point in our lives, for example, you turn 15, and then the government tells you you will die, for example, at 16. And this is kind of a violation because for your personality, because you live your life, for example, you're one type of person, and then when you know that, you become a completely different person because of the government, because of the information that you give, because you start to take more risks and so on, and yes, the government changes.
Can we just forget about the government because there's no government in this way?
Okay. For example, I said you just received this information.
Okay, so this debate is framed just okay. Cool. You all get that. Just keep in mind this debate is formed in a hypothetical situation where status quo is already changed. That's why you were given the piece of information before you were given the motion, right? The piece of information, there is an individual in the world that knows time of death for everybody else, right? And then the motion is given. I think we go 1, 2, 3. 1.
This knowledge will move the focus of life onto death. I mean, the people will structure their whole life according to the information about their death. And they will not live the way they would. They won't be free to act the way they would act if they had less information, and probably they would change their whole behavior in order to do the best or do the thing they want most before dying. And that could be either good or bad, but it will change everything.
Okay.
That's me? Yeah. The question here is whether we believe in historical determination. So my point is that if you have information when you're going to die, most probably, and if it's not due to a disease, you will avoid this death. So there's a huge probability that nothing in your life will even change. Because if you're meant to die in a car accident on the very day of your death, you don't get on a car. And simply you avoid this death and you continue your life the way it was supposed to be.
That
Okay. So yeah, what I was going to say that basically challenges the notion of free will, what George has said, and the fact that in such situation we could talk about that a person who knows about his death has a type of invincibility, so whatever happens, will survive, and that person who knows about everybody else's has some kind of leverage on the other people. Yeah, just my rambling.
Someone here?
Yeah.
Well, in mind, if we have to generalize what the problem is actually with this topic, I think that it is about whether people should be something materialistic or not. I mean, it is just like you have an expiration date, you have an expiration period, and you have to do your thing before this happens. I mean, we have to look at humans as if they were robots or something. It changed the situation, it changed the subject of their life.
What does it change? What is the status quo at the moment that is very important for this debate? How do we live our lives? What is the one thing we don't know?
When we are going to die?
We have no clue when our existence on this planet or on this world is going to end. I can die right now out of the park. I have no idea. I can live 90 years and, you know, be a very old grandpa when I die, but I can die right now, and we have no idea, right? And that's the first and very important thing, right? Because we are not yet to decide, like, oh, I have, I don't know, 5 years and 2 days, so in 5 years and 2 days I have to achieve my goal, whichever it is, or I have to do X, Y, Z, right? Complete the bucket list, whatever it is. We're pretty much, yeah, right? So if we would know when we were going to die, as we've heard before, many things would change. But that probably answers to your question. There is no one right case that you can run on this debate. Strategically, what are the most important parts that would change? What things you would choose to talk about? Like, very short.
I think the debate is about human nature, because if everyone is aware of the date when they're going to die, there's two behaviors. They're either going to be very destructive and try to live it up on the expense of everything else and without consequences, or they're going to be very productive and try to build something before they go away. And the question here is, if you believe that they will do the first thing, the bad things more, then you should probably not reveal the information. And if you believe that they will do more good things than bad things, then you should probably reveal the information.
In hypothetical debates like this, you don't have to lock yourself in and say there are only 2 types of behavior, right? Or to say there are only 2 things that can happen. That's not necessary. No, I'm just kidding. Really, not necessary. Here's why. You can say that there are 2 scenarios that you want to talk about, right? Or one scenario that you want to talk about, which is really problematic. And that because people are not going to be afraid what's going to happen to them, right? They're going to start living very risky and do very risky stuff all the time. So for instance, I get in my car and I drive in an opposite direction in the street because I don't give a fuck. I know that I'm not going to die, right? Well, you know, crazy stuff. And you say you can base your whole case, your whole argumentation, based on that scenario. If it's a plausible, if you prove it's a plausible scenario, and we should be afraid of that one, right? It's quite enough for the case. On the opposite, right? You want to say something?
Yes, Evan mentioned that we won't die. It's different. For example, to be invalid. So if you're driving in the opposite direction, you can achieve car accident and be like living vegetables, right?
Absolutely.
So we haven't discussed this point.
No, absolutely, right? But there's a debate there. I'm just saying that in these hypothetical debates, you can pick one scenario or 2 that you are trying to prove, and that you're trying to prove them good or bad, right? Either way that you want to go. Right. Does that unlock that notion for this discussion? Okay. Another motion? Anybody? Go.
This house believes that military coups are a form of democracy.
Military coups are not a regime by themselves. They're just a mechanism to change one regime to another. It may be changed to a democracy, but military coups can be a democracy themselves. Coups are just a mechanism. Another mechanism is street revolution in civil war or whatever it may be. But those are two categories. So it's not a regime type.
Okay, can I just say something? In debates in general, when we're changing because they're about to change, or we believe something that is different than common belief currently in the world. So when it says, if the motion would be this house who believes that military coups are not form of democracy, it wouldn't be a motion. Because each and every motion changes the status quo in some direction. So that's why we have a proposition or government which is proposing something, which is a change that they're proposing, and then we're debating whether or not that change is good or bad, or do we believe in their statement or not, and blah, 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 blah. You get that? But each and every debate is a change. It can be a very incremental change, it can be a change in a set of beliefs, it can be a change, practical change in the world, it can be a new measure that we would introduce, whatever, right? But it's change. So even though something is written in the Constitution or the law or in your knowledge, you can of course win a debate by explaining why that's true, obviously, right? However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't provide your argumentation for it, right? It's not enough to say, but yeah, this political scientist said this, that, and the other, and everybody's like, he said that. Oh, okay, cancel the motion. Sorry, right? So that's the thing that you need to know. So even though when you know that stuff, you have to explain it through the argument, and that can win you a debate. Granted, right? But it's not enough if you just know it. Just don't be blocked in those scopes, okay? Just because something is a law or it's written in the Constitution or whatever, that doesn't make it unchangeable. Unchangeable. Yes. Is that okay? Okay. Just be clear about that. Yeah, go on.
There's also another problem with going with theory knowledge. The fact that when we say radical coups and when we define democracy, the opposition can easily come out and say, we're fine with definitions, but also bear in mind that democracy brings certain values which the military coups today have. And they can basically in some way focus on some parts of democracy, which is still a democracy, and to show and go just like across the definition that you offered without argumentation, and to actually prove the opposite way. So bear in mind that all the theory knowledge has, what Milan said before, a nice logical mechanism brackets which are explaining why the theory is there and why that theory can be a base for your argumentation to prove the motion. Okay?
Okay, now let's talk about this one briefly, because we don't have much time. We want to cover it. So, military coups, form of democracy. Military coups, form of democracy.
Okay, so as my colleague said, we're obviously both political scientists, so we have the same idea about it. Military coup can lead to democracy. It's not a form of regime in itself, but the most essential thing that it has to do in order to achieve this is, first of all, have elections. So if the military coup does not offer elections to be held, because defining democracy means power of the people. If there are no elections imposed, then there will be no democracy. The military coup can last for a very long time until there is a counter coup, for instance.
Sorry. The way, because I have talked about the motion about as I'm proposing, the way we understand it, the act of doing the military coup, can this eventually count as something that kind of overlaps with democratic values? For example, if you cannot change the regime in any other way possible, can a military coup be justified? But also don't take the most radical out of it, because it's also not the, like you said, the situation. So it had a problem with finding a situation that can be alright to have a military coup inside that way, not to be as radical, so radical that nothing else can happen in this situation.
All right. Do you remember during the previous session when we heard the first very good argument, because we heard 2 or 3, but when we heard the first very good argument, how it was like very long and deep in the sense that it explained a lot of things. You have that somewhere in mind. So he tried, for instance, that was, I think, Nepal motion in their government. So he was trying to explain that in general, governments are responsible for their people. They should cater their people, yada yada yada. He was spending some time on that, right? That is called the context. That is called something that you want to paint for people in the room to understand before you come to the point of your argument. Because that's some kind of a pretext or some kind of knowledge that you all need to have in your heads before my argument can make any sense. Is that okay? In emotions like this, for instance, you need to paint that picture to people. So you first need to tell them in which countries or in which kind of societies, which kind of governments we have military coups, or we had military coups in history, right? And you do that in a way which suits your side of the motion, first. Secondly, you explain what the military coup is, very briefly. Then you explain who consists the military, right? And then when you have all that information, or when the judges have all that information, then we can discuss whether or not we can, we can connect democratic values and democracy with that or not. That's where the debate is. But before that, all of this needs to happen in order for that discussion to make any sense. Is that okay? Right? That's called painting the picture. But that is very important in each and every debate, so we have some common ground. We know where military coups happen, we know who consists the military, and when we are all aware of those facts, then we can have a proper debate. All right, is that okay? Yeah. When does that need to happen? In the beginning. All right, in the beginning. What if in the beginning the Prime Minister does not do that?
No one understands what he's talking about.
Well, yeah, we will definitely have some arguments, but like they're obviously misplaced, right? So what do you do if you're, for instance, a member of the second row, or a member of the government, rather?
So you're asking what's happening in the beginning of a military coup?
No. So in the beginning of the
Oh,
debate,
if you're on the side. Okay.
yeah. So
You ask him what the heck.
you cannot ask me; he's on your bench.
Well, you define it for him.
Yeah, you define it for him.
You get up and then you paint the picture for everyone, and without going into details in terms of mechanism or giving some sort of modeling or whatever, you explain how it works, and then you're going to your own organization. Is that okay? Okay, cool. If you're on the opposite, well, you paint a different picture that suits you better, right?
You can define it.
Cool.